Hey everyone, it's Wendy with Teen Esteem, and I am on location today down at the Danville Police Station. Not because I've been arrested, so that's exciting, but I'm going to interview a special guest who's going to talk to us parents about what's happening in our community, trends in youth, all kinds of stuff. So, dun dun dun. Allan, introduce yourself. Who are you?
Hi, I'm Allan Shields, Chief of Police for the town of Danville. Start with professionally. I've been in law enforcement for about 21 years. I'm a lieutenant with the Contra Costa Sheriff's Office, and I've been assigned to the town of Danville off and on for probably about 11 years. And I've held a lot of assignments, but kind of in this area, I've done investigations where I've investigated juvenile crimes. I've also done patrol where we've responded out to, parties with kids that are in crisis for one reason or another. So I've had a lot of engagement when it comes specifically with our youth in this community.
And talk about your kids. You have a kid, your dad.
Yeah, so personally, I've actually lived in town for 18 years. So I've actually lived here longer than I've worked here. And so my wife and I have lived here for 18 years. We've got 3 beautiful boys. They're 17, 14, and 11. They go to the local schools here in Danville. And I can empathize with a lot of parents that are probably listening to this, that my wife, Chrissy, and I, we see a lot of the same challenges. And a lot of times I get some of the same questions, and we're struggling too to figure out what the right answer is. I tend to joke sometimes that I really wish when I'd go to these calls and I see this, a situation where really I wish I could turn it on its head and make things right. I always kind of joke and I say, I wish I had the fairy dust to just sprinkle on it and make it right. But as parents, a lot of times, frankly, it just takes a lot of hard work.
Yeah, parenting is not easy. So you're not going to give us the dust today or all the exact how-tos to have the perfect family?
Well, I think the dust is what's woven into each one of us as parents, and it's the hard work that we all decide to put in. And I'll really steal a quote from Tyler Scott over at CPC. Later is longer. And when you have the ability to look so far down the road and know that all of this hard work we put in as parents and as community members will pay off in the long run, because later is longer.
Wow. Okay, cool. That's a great start. Well, let's start by talking a little bit about social media, screen time, all of that, because, that's been a lot during this last year, obviously. So I'm wondering how you think social media in general and our constant media influx has impacted our youth today.
Well, I really wish I could say that, especially speaking from the parent perspective, that my kids don't look at screens, but they do. And so the issues that we used to see early on in law enforcement centered around bad decision making. It could be as it relates to alcohol use, to marijuana. And what we're seeing with this influx of social media is that things that may seem to be unpopular in smaller social circles, because you have such wide and broad access and the frequency that you see in social media and some of our other platforms that you can get on your little screen, it tends to kind of normalize behavior that as parents and community members, we would prefer not to see. It also provides, frankly, a secret meeting room for people. Your child, you think they're safe because they're in your living room, in their bedroom, or they're at your trusted neighbor or friend's house. When the reality is, when you think about it from a virtual standpoint, they're literally anywhere in the world, and they're speaking with anyone in the world. And so when you really start to frame and look at it like that, our kids nowadays are being given responsibilities that were never thrust on a 12, 13, 14-year-old child.
Yeah. Well, something you said is really interesting about normalizing things that maybe aren't normal, but also, do you think it projects that normalcy to our kids and it makes kids think everyone's doing all these things just because they've seen it on an app, but with what's the reality?
Yeah, it's interesting. We tend to think it's the prominence. It's what's right in front of your face. And we even see it with crime, right? I'll give you an example to maybe draw a parallel. A lot of people in town tend to think crime is up and it's through the roof. And the reality is it's lower than it has ever been since incorporation, since 1982. Back in the 80s and 90s, we were at about 800 Part 1 crimes per for the population, and that was with a lower population. Last year, we were at about 260. So
Wow.
that's a much reduced rate. But when you have, my purse was stolen, my car was broken into, there was a stranger down the street, and all of this is posted on Nextdoor and Facebook and all these sites, it tends to make it seem like there is this onslaught and so much, when the reality is, when you start looking at the statistics behind it, that it isn't there. And we see the same thing with our kids.
So, talk about like drinking, for example, underage drinking. Where are we at with that in our community?
Well, I think a good example too is, if you talk about underage drinking, is it tends to continue to be an issue, but it continues to be an issue at the same rate that it always has. And so here's the interesting part. Every year, as the new freshman class comes into our high schools, I get the new freshman parents that say, "Can you believe how much drugs there are in our high schools? And it's so much worse than it's ever been." And the reality is they're just being now exposed to it. When you look at the Healthy Kids Survey, it really continues to show, I think it's about 25% of our juniors and seniors are using alcohol or drugs. And the number of students that are either in the experimenting category or in the frequent use category of making those decisions to either use alcohol or drugs, that really hasn't changed. It's just maybe their choice has. Maybe, in the 90s and 2000s, maybe it was more alcohol. Today, it may be a little more on marijuana and vaping. So really, it's about attacking the decision to do something that's counter to healthy living versus not. But the frequency of students seems to be about the same.
Interesting. So what you're saying is a lot of kids are making healthy choices.
Yeah, that's what I really do try to press that.
On social media, it seems like they're not. Like everyone's drinking, everyone's out of control. But from the data, it sounds like there's still a lot of kids that are making great choices.
Yeah, and I think I've got a great perspective because I get to see a lot of the positive kids. When you look at our leadership classes and you look at the majority of our students and you look at the after school activities that our kids belong in, we have some really smart, really intelligent, and very motivated kids that are they are our future leaders. They're the ones that are going to go on and lead our country in a positive direction. And we've got a lot of really smart ones. And we just need to make sure that we put out the information about how hazardous some of these decisions can be.
And when you think about hazardous decisions, let's talk to parents out there who might think, my kids are going to drink. I know teenagers are going to drink. They're going to be teenagers. They're going to do these things. So I'd rather have them at my house. I'd rather have the safe house where I know I can take their keys and they're home drinking. So my house is going to be a place where kids can drink safely.
Yeah, I think what you've done is, and we see this with whether it's prescription pills or anything else, is again, you're talking about normalizing. You're a parent. You're a leader of your household. And so the expectation is that you are setting the example for your kids. And first off, I'll take the very cop approach and tell you that it's not lawful. If you host a party where kids can have access to alcohol or drugs, that is a crime. We do enforce it. We try to publicize it several times a year. We put it in our newsletter. We put it everywhere we can because we want to do what good cops do, which is to avoid these situations. And so I would ask parents, help us out to that end. Let's try to avoid it. On the criminal side, it is certainly a crime. It is certainly something that we are aggressive about. We have seen that it does not do anything to curb the use outside of the home. The kids that are allowed to drink in the home are also the ones that go to the park and drink. They're the ones that go to another person's house and drink. They're the ones that are stealing the alcohol from the stores. You're enabling and allowing that behavior to continue, and it really is about making better decisions.
Okay. That's pretty clear. Another thing I've been hearing a lot more about is fentanyl. Mm-hmm. So I'm wondering how prevalent that is in our community and with young people. Well, talk a little bit about it in case someone doesn't really know what fentanyl is.
Yeah, so fentanyl is a concentrated opiate. So it is a painkiller. It's used to treat severe pain, and it's not extremely prevalent in our area, and we don't typically see it with our teens. When we see overdose issues or issues of abuse, we tend to see it in our early 20s and beyond. And if you think that we haven't had overdoses in the San Ramon Valley, we have. And I'll make my quick pitch right now. If someone is having any kind of medical emergency or crisis, please report it. Our commitment and and when I say commitment, we're also following the law, is we are more concerned with getting the person help than arresting or prosecuting. So it's very important that people call. And we've had officers that have come and administered, an opioid dose of Narcan or naloxone that will actually help that person pull out of a potential overdose. And then we rely heavily on our San Ramon Valley Fire partners. But so please, if you do have a situation where there is an overdose or a medical emergency, please call. Don't fear prosecution. Make sure that you call.
Okay, so don't fear prosecution. So I know for teenagers especially, but someone else that maybe isn't even a teenager that's in a situation where someone's been using and they're using with them, they're afraid they are going to get in trouble. And that's one of the things we do talk to students about is making that call when you see the signs, for example, of alcohol poisoning. But they sometimes don't make that call, and it can be deadly because they are afraid, well, I'm drunk, I'm high, and what are the police going to do to me? So in a situation like that, teen A's, say having seizures or something because of drug use, teen B makes the call. What would happen when you show up on the scene? You see teen A is in trouble, but teen B is okay, but they're obviously high. What happens?
Well, we're going to make sure that we treat the medical portion of that. And I don't want to make it appear as though it is a home base and free. If you're someone that is supplying drugs and alcohol and you poison someone, that is a crime. But if you are party to this event and you see something happening, we want that person to report it. This isn't, I think sometimes you see in the movies where the car goes up, they kick the person out of the emergency room, and then off the car goes because they're afraid of getting caught. That isn't how it works. Call us, we'll come down, we'll treat the medical situation, we'll get the resources there, and we'll work to save that person's life. Don't let someone die because you're afraid of getting prosecuted or getting arrested or investigated. That's not our focus. Our focus is on saving a life.
All that to say, your job is a little bit stressful, having to walk into all these different kinds of situations. And that's just obviously a small sampling of some of the stuff that you see and hear and experience. So what do you do, Mr. Shields, to help cope with all the stress?
Well, I try to do as much non-law enforcement stuff as I can. And lately it's been a little difficult because we've had a pretty intense year. And I try to spend as much time with my family as I can. I feel like I can never spend enough time. I feel like I am not doing my fatherly and husband duties sometimes. But I think that's where I get centered is helping my kids out, maybe going for a mountain bike ride, exercising. We know there's been study after study that says if you just get up and move around a little bit, that's gonna help out quite a bit. And I also try to volunteer. If I can sneak in some time to volunteer, I'll do that. And I think there's two big things. One is to have a forgiving attitude. So let's fill the pot that spans between all of us with good stuff, right? So be forgiving, and then as much as I can do to be giving as well. I can tell you, when I think back to birthdays and Christmases and those times where maybe we exchange gifts, I can always remember the gifts that I gave, and sometimes it's harder to remember the gifts that I received. I think giving is in our nature, and it's how we get better, and I think it's how a community like this thrives the way it does, because we have so many people, frankly, like you, Wendy, that are willing to step up, donate time to your community, go after worthwhile causes, and say, I want this to be a good community filled with good people doing good things.
Oh, that's good. A lot of good stuff in there, a lot of different kind of coping mechanisms. And I think that obviously helps young people and adults alike to stay out of trouble and to stay healthy when you're making those good decisions, exercising and spending time with your family. Forgiving, that's a good one. Excuse me. And giving of your time.
Yeah, it's hard. Sometimes I think we're so quick to not forgive, when if we just forgive right away and then work to move forward, I think we can be a lot more positive.
Yeah, and brings your own healing when you can forgive people.
Yeah, the first time, if there's an issue and my first notion is to forgive, I feel better.
Yeah, that's really good. So that made me think, why did you get into law enforcement?
Yeah, it's kind of weird, actually. I'll give a fairly personal story. So I had a very good friend. I wasn't a great student in high school. It wasn't until I got to college that I started actually hitting the books and studying. But my very good friend David was, I grew up with him. He was a lot smarter than me, did very good in college. He graduated magna cum laude from Tuskegee, was going to Vanderbilt Law School, was in his first year of law school. And I remember he visited me when I was on base in Oklahoma on his way to law school. And then in that fall semester, he and 3 of his friends were hit head on by a drunk driver. And all 4 of them in that car died, and the drunk driver survived. And, there's a man at 23 years old that was taken out of the world, and that was a completely preventable event. Drinking and driving is 100% preventable. You don't have to drink and then drive. Yeah. You can make one bad choice without making the second one. Mm-hmm. And then I realized I've always been in a fairly giving way, serving in the military. I was fit, and I thought that I had the character to do it, because that's probably the largest thing we hire for it when it comes to fit, is the character. And I felt like I was the type of person that could commit and serve the community. And I thought, what better way to do it than trying to look at those predictable negative events and keep them from occurring and prevent them, and preventing those tragedies.
Wow, I love that, and I love just the prevention piece.
Yeah.
And that's, as you know, a big part of what we do at Teen Esteem is prevention. So.
Well, and when we look at it, on the prevention side, we know that there's things my partners here in law enforcement, we look at a lot of studies when it comes to criminality and social issues, and what are some of the common links to fixing and repairing those. And we know that through several of the studies, it is about the influence of positive adult role models. Mm-hmm. And the more people, and especially when you're talking about our kids and establishing those values and those morals, we know that when we have a positive role models for them to interact with, whether it's an after-school program, maybe like The Rock on Monday nights, when kids can go to those and they can see other kids making good decisions, when they can be led by people, not their parents, whether it's a baseball team, a cheer squad, whatever that may be, when you can have those positive influences that say, this is why we do what we do, and it's who we are, mm-hmm. You're going to be building great people.
Yes.
It's funny.
I totally agree.
Yeah, as a parent, I use the baseball analogy that, I can tell my kids, glove down, out in front, alligator hands, butt down, and I'm just dad. But when the coach tells them the exact same thing, well, that's coach telling them that. And it just speaks on a very small scale to the power of having as many people spreading the same and correct message at the same time.
Yeah, and well, thank you for supporting Teen Esteem. I know that that's part of why you're taking your time out to do this, believing in what we do and our messaging, and being another set of different adults coming into classrooms and talking to students and saying the same things their parents might be saying, but it's a different. Yeah,
I think it's the teacup, right? The teacup example.
Yeah, talk about the teacup.
I love this story,
Allan.
Well, I was actually going to add to it if you described it, but it's we talk about what is it now? The red Solo cups, the teacups, and what is
the mug. So you've got the Solo cup that's like disposable trash, not really worth anything. The mug that's just kind of average. No one would really notice if I was gone. And then the teacup, like invaluable, not replaceable.
Yeah.
Priceless.
I always tie that into a car analogy. We treat cars as though they're a throwaway, but if you were told that you only had one car for the rest of your life, you would take excellent care of that car. And that's our body. So when we make these decisions and we choose to do things that are negatively going to impact our lives and our body and our relationships, that's teacup thinking. That's not Solo cup thinking. Mm-hmm. Solo cup is, I don't really care what happens to this cup. I'm going to throw it away. Mm-hmm. Recycling my cars. I don't care if I speed. I don't need to change the oil. I don't need to do any of the preventative maintenance. If I crash it, who cares? I'll just get another one. That's not how life works. We've got one body. We've got one shot to do this life as best as we possibly can. And that's teacup thinking. That's not Solo cup thinking.
It is. And yet, one thing I thought of when you were sharing about not being a good student in high school, so when we're trying to get kids to think of themselves as teacups, as invaluable and irreplaceable and having value, so making good choices because of it. But some kids that are struggling in high school, so maybe they're not as academic or something, can often feel like a mug or a Solo cup, but that's not really who they are. And one thing that we emphasize is starting over and resetting, and you have time to work things out and get back on track, but get on track. So I think that's kind of a cool example in your story of You know, you weren't a great student in high school.
But I think
Then
the
look at you
question
now.
is what is on track? And I never
Yeah.
felt like, even though I was not a great student academically, I never felt like I wasn't on track towards being a good person, right?
Yeah.
I've told my kids they're all different, they're all unique, they're all beautiful, wonderful kids, and they've all got different qualities, and they're going to handle situations different. Really, what I'm searching for is at the end of whatever they want to mark as a point or a phase in their life, at each point, if they can look back and say that they're a good person and they treat people well and they're giving and forgiving people, then I'm good. And we're good because I know that they are continuing to set themselves up to be good and successful people.
Wherever they end up.
Yeah.
And not everyone has to fit that same mold, but I think we get caught in that sometimes, especially in this valley, if everyone has to go to these same 12 colleges and do X, Y, and Z, and that's not true. Everyone has a different path to their success.
Yeah.
Cool. With that being said, with all the parenting wisdom that you're going to fix us all and help us all.
Yeah, I wish I could that's my fairy dust. It just doesn't work that way.
Well, I need some fairy dust. So what's some of what you think is like your best advice, or like the dad slogan that your kids know you say over and over and they roll their eyes, but someday when they get older, you know they're going to say that to their kids? Like, do you have a slogan or certain set of things that you always just harp on, or what?
So I'll kind of I'll split this.
You?
I'll split this into two.
Okay.
And the first thing is, I think a lot of times what we see as parents is we try to attack these micro problems. It's maybe a child that looks like they want to use alcohol. Maybe they're staying out late. Maybe they're using an app, or they're using an app in an inappropriate way. They're doing things that are either in your house not appropriate, morally wrong, whatever it may be, or sometimes in our house here at the police department, they're crimes. And so what I would say is just, let's scale that back and let's just talk about how to make good decisions, how to deal with the peer pressure of it, how to work through all of that. So as parents, let's not get hung up on these small issues, because it is like trying to take a hammer to 1,000 nails. And what we want to do is we want to look at the big macro behaviors that our kids are exhibiting. When it comes to behaviors of our kids, what can you look for? A lot of, especially our new high school kids, the parents are always asking me, what can I do? What should I search this and do this? And really what we advise, and the information we say is just look for changes in behavior and ask them why they may be experiencing that change in behavior. I'm going to leave you with my dad's advice, because this is hilarious.
Okay, so would you roll your eyes at this advice?
No, this is the advice I would roll my eyes at when my dad would tell me.
Wait, bring it.
Okay,
bring it, Dad.
And then the sad part is what you do is you find yourself saying that to your kids, and then you roll your eyes at yourself for saying it to your kids, and now they're rolling your eyes. It's like an eye roll fest. It is absolutely absurd. But my dad, he would always, instead of, because no one wants to really be told what to do, right?
Right.
Clean your room, do this, do that. Don't do that, don't. And
Especially
so my dad
when you
had
know everything. Why does anyone need to tell you?
Well, so my dad just had a good way, and he would we'd present him with a problem, or it would naturally be presented. And this saying is probably going to be more funny to me than anyone else, but he would lay out his plan, and he'd say like, well, I would do this, and I would make sure that I was home on time, because you want to be able to go to work in the morning, and you don't want to be out so late. And he's like, but you can do what you want, but that's what I would do.
It's like a little passive aggressive.
Yeah. And it was like, so we'd look and we're like, okay, we that's you're telling us what you want us to do, not asking. But so it was always funny. So that's our kind of dinner table, our Thanksgiving, our Christmas joke is, when we want someone to sit down and grab a plate, hey, it's time to eat. You might want to go fix a plate of food, but you can do what you want. But that's what I would do.
You can make a terrible decision, but that's up to you.
Yeah.
Okay.
So it's pretty funny. We kind of overplay that joke in our house a little bit.
All right. Any closing words that you'd want to say to the parents of the Valley?
Teen Esteem is a great program, and I've been to some of the auctions. It's a good community-based program. We have a lot of community-based programs here that really work to make our community better. I was actually talking with someone earlier today, and they said, why is Danville the safest city 4 years in a row in California? Why is that? And I said, it has less to do with the police department. We seem to be the focal point of that, but it really has to do with the parents, the community groups, and everyone that's pulling towards these common objectives. Whether it's Teen Esteem, the police department, the town, everyone wants to make people's lives better. And that's what we all do. And then I'll tie it back to Pastor Tyler Scott. Later is longer. A lot of times as parents, as community members, we may look for this short-term win, the win that wins today, or maybe even tomorrow. But we really need to stay focused on the win that wins 20 years from now, 30 years from now, because we're making, molding, and creating good people.
All right. That's good stuff. Thank you so much, Chief Shields, and had a good time.
Thank you, Team Esteem.